double noise?
Yes.
Okay, shit. How do I turn my sound off?
You can mute your computer if
I'll
you
do
want.
that. Okay, give me 1 second.
And put your headset in your phone.
That makes more sense.
Okay.
Muting the computer.
All right, people,
I can't hear you
just
first.
bear with us.
Sorry, hello.
No.
Exactly. Figuring it all out.
This is the prologue.
Okay, here we go. And also my screen is like super cracked.
But you look great. There's like
oh, thank you.
shafts
Little
of
rainbows.
light hitting yeah.
That's cool. Okay, great. I think that works now. Hello?
Okay, so you can mute your computer.
Great. I think it's muted.
Testing 1, 2, 3, Ryan. Okay. Now say
Yeah?
something. Okay,
Same.
good.
Okay,
Good,
great.
good, good.
Thanks for bearing with me.
Chelio, you can hear me, right?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, so on Instagram, I'm going to let the people know that Chelio Bourdin is going to be perceiving my chat with Ryan Simpkins and turning it into live perception art, which you can see on Facebook Live or later on the YouTube channel. But you will not be able to see his art on Instagram. Okay, so hi, Chelio. How are you?
Oh, very good. Very excited with this amazing guest. So I want to catch all beautiful energy and try to do something beautiful for us. For everybody.
Thank you. Okay, I will share how I know you and about our show before I introduce Ryan. But you can start if you want to, and then we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you at the end and see what you want to share with us.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, Chelio, he's an amazing artist. We actually curated an exhibit together at the Venice Biennale at the end of 2019 in the name of this show, Humanizing the Icon, which was inspired by artwork in my Mary Pickford film. So somebody saw a rough cut and welcomed us to Venice, and I was able to curate an exhibit. And Humanizing the Icon went into everything from spirituality and mythology all the way up to pop culture, kind of like cracking open the paradigm of what is icon, what is human. And it's a lot of people just want to jump to fame, and well, we'll see what you think icon really is. But
Sure.
So yeah, Chelio is really incredible. Okay, so I guess maybe they can't hear you on Facebook, which is interesting because usually they can.
What about now? But now I hear two of me.
Yeah, no, it's not supposed to be like that. Wait. So put your headset. Maybe do put your headset in the computer.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, hang on, everyone. Okay.
People are loving you on Instagram.
Hi,
they love
everyone
you,
on
Ryan.
Instagram. How are you? Someone said they want Chipotle. That's exciting.
Okay, so they can hear us on Instagram, and you can hear us on Facebook. Let's see.
Facebook can hear me.
Lori, can you give us like a thumbs up or something?
I cannot hear her
On
on Zoom.
Zoom, I muted myself.
No, I think you're good. I think you're good, Ryan.
Okay.
I think so. Hopefully.
The host would like me to unmute, so I unmuted.
Usually we have to mute one and it's totally fine.
Good now.
Okay. But are you double?
I can only hear one now. I have two headphones in.
You do?
Okay. Does this work though? Or are you getting you are getting like feedback, aren't you?
Yeah, but it's not supposed to have to be like this. Oh well. I don't really mind it. Yeah. Actually,
it's not distracting to me.
Is it? It's not.
No, no, it was great.
Okay. Um,
I
okay.
only hear myself twice and I only hear you once, so like that's okay for me.
Interesting. I only hear myself once. I only want to hear you once.
Oh shit.
Oh wait, let me do this. Maybe it was on
Okay.
me. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Okay.
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 Did that fix it?
Yes.
Okay, amazing. Okay, great. We're doing it. We're
Okay.
doing the thing.
So it is so nice to reconnect with you.
I know, after so long. It's so good to see you.
You too. It has been, I mean, we shot a film in 2009 that Julie Pacino was directing, and your little brother played my son.
Oh my God, yeah.
And you were what, like 12?
I I think so. I'm like, what year was 2009?
2009, like
That was 12, was that
11?
12 years ago? 11
Something
years
like
ago?
that. Yeah.
So yeah, I think I was about 12, which is such a different, bizarre. 12 was a weird year for me.
Okay, why? Let's start there.
So, okay, sure. So my little brother, we're both actors and both grew up acting. I was also like, Pittsburgh was not the best. I'm sure it's really fun as someone who can like legally like drink and do things. But as a 12-year-old, I was like, what the fuck? Like, this is so gloomy and sad. And I was just really, really sad. And that was just the first time I remember feeling like, what's wrong with me? But it was also so special because we moved, like, we did that. We did the stuff in New York with you guys, which was
Yes.
so special. And we got to meet so many different.
Uh-oh, I lost your audio. Wait. Your audio is like cutting in and out. Ooh. Is it like a wireless headset? No. I can't hear you anymore. Mercury's in retrograde, by the way. Nope. There. Wait. Oh, I can't hear you.
Okay, hang on. Let me try this again.
Now I can hear you through the computer. I just turned my computer back up,
Okay, was that
which
enough?
they can hear you this way if that.
This works for me.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how computers or technology or any of it work.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I see. Because you're freezing on Instagram. I think it's your connection.
My phone is so bad because it's so old.
Okay. We can just roll with it. And if people want to hop over to Facebook, it's jennifer.r.delia. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Okay, I'm back.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, look.
Okay. So you were saying that, so you were like, did you actually experience depression, like to where you had to call attention to it? Like you were like concerned about your state?
I was just like really, really miserable. And the only also like I mean, you're growing up working on sets, like you are surrounded by people who are older than you all the time. And I got really good at making friends with people who were much older than me, but I was truly had no one my age except for my little brother who's often working. And so I did experience like a very real depression, but I don't think I knew what that was. I think I was very like, everyone feels sadness and that's just what this is. I'm just like sad.
Yeah.
And so I just felt this deep sadness for a long time without really calling attention to it because I didn't want to make people think I was like, I don't know, I thought I was like special or my feelings were like more important than theirs.
Mm.
When in reality, I was experiencing something like totally real and heartbreaking. That was like, I don't know, even if your trauma is like less than another person's, like that doesn't make it invalid.
No.
So I think that's what I was dealing with when I was 12 years old.
Wow. And what movie was Ty doing? What brought
He
you
was
guys?
doing a movie called The Next 3 Days with Russell Crowe and Elizabeth Banks. Who Russell is still like a very close, very good family friend. And it was a really special experience for a lot of reasons. We got our dog Chapin when we were making that movie, who's like still to this day my best friend in the whole world.
Oh.
So yeah.
So you're able to see the silver lining and experiences that were really, really challenging.
Yeah, I think you have to because it's like you go through that, but it's still like it's not all. I mean, it is. It can feel all consuming, especially when you're in it. But you look back and you realize like these lovely little moments that you had to find to get through it. I guess you know.
That's really beautiful. And that was the first time you had to like leave home for 3 months and like duck out of school for that long?
I actually no, but I wasn't doing it for me. You know, when I
Yeah.
was in third grade, did like movie after movie after movie. I think I like only attended like school in person for like 2 months. And
Wow.
that was really hard and confusing as well. And then before that, when I was in second grade, I did a Broadway show, and my family and I we moved to New York, and I was like working, like at this theater like every single day. So I'd had those experiences of like intense work and being around not people your age, but they had all been for me, and I was the one like doing the work, you know. Whereas
Yeah.
on this one, I was very much just there with my little brother while he was doing work, and I was like, I don't know, reading a book in Pittsburgh or something, you know.
I just remember like how like intellectually advanced you were and like you felt like such an old soul.
That's very
Did you
sweet.
hear
I
that a
just
lot?
get that kind of a
I
lot.
would I gathered. Well, speaking of your journey in terms of getting into acting so young and like you say working with seasoned professionals and just being in the set environment, what has that been like for you in terms of growing up?
It's interesting. I mean, I had a really cool, weird childhood that I'm really grateful for because I was able to do this thing so deeply that never really felt like work when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Like there were times where it did, just because you get so busy, but you mostly just see it as this like play and this expression. And I, from a really young age, sort of understood acting to be like an escape and like a type of therapy
Hmm.
rather than like a work. But it's weird growing up. I never had social issues really as far as like, oh, I was surrounded by only adults. I did not talk to kids my own age. Like that was part of it maybe, but I think I did really well considering that. And
Uh-huh.
I was able to mature at a really young age. But what is weird is becoming an adult and suddenly becoming conscious of like the fact that the work you're doing has like a method to it
Yeah.
to achieve your goals. And that I think is something that like every transitioning young actor goes through, and why so many end up struggling for a while in between like being a teenager and being an adult. Because it's like you have to sort of relearn what you've been doing your whole life, which is really weird and really scary. But it's also really exciting and fun.
So it's like something that just seemed to come naturally, or they would say you'd have like a raw gift for it. Is something that you're suddenly like, oh, wait, now I'm aware that I'm doing this thing. It's
Yeah.
like becoming aware of breathing. It's like, oh, wait, I've been doing this without thinking about it, and now suddenly I'm being asked to think about it, and I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it is like being aware of breathing. You're like, I've been doing this based off of instinct and very natural feeling. And in some ways that's still there. Like if I have to have a best friend in a film or like a sibling in a film, I think this is also because I've worked with my actual younger brother so much. Like I try to build those relationships before we start working so that that chemistry is just like naturally there.
Mhm.
And as many things as I can do like that of like I did one film where my character carried around this ceramic doll with her the entire movie. So for weeks leading up to filming that, I carried around for like a month before I carried around the doll with me because I was like, well, I need to understand like at what this connection feels like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes from a place of like when you're a kid going through those things, you're like actually really feeling them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're an adult and you're like, okay, how can I get myself to that place that when I was a child, I was just instinctually like thrown into, you know?
Did you ever go, oh, wait, like I really am talented? Like this wasn't just like a childhood, like happy accident. Like I can actually do this.
I don't know if I ever feel that way. Sometimes you're set and it just feels really right. Like, the film I did with the doll, that movie was called Lady World, and that felt really special because every single actress on that film, we were all the same age. We were 50 years. And we were all putting in like more effort than we ever had before. And it felt like everyone was sort of in the same boat of that experience of becoming conscious of like breathing.
Yeah.
And really like putting blood, sweat, and tears into it. And that felt like, oh wow, this is really special that we're able to do this. And the film that I just did also, that I just got back from, there were moments where I was like, wow, I'm really lucky that I really enjoy doing this thing and I'm not terrible at it.
Yeah.
But between every job, I'm always like, oh, I'm a terrible actor. I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
I know actors that have been doing it for decades and decades and are some of the most like prolific, legendary actors. But you know, and they still have those feelings.
Yeah, I don't think it ever goes away. I was listening to an interview with Adam Driver a year or so ago, and I think he was asked, like, does it ever get easy? Or, like, do you ever show up and just know what you're going to do? And he's like, no. It always feels like you're throwing stuff at a wall and seeing what sticks. Like, it always changes. And it always feels like you're grasping at straws. And I think he said, like, and if it didn't feel that way, like, you wouldn't be doing it. Like, if it felt easy, or if you were just had the confidence to be like, yeah, I know exactly what I'm doing, then you wouldn't be doing the actual work that you need to do.
Yeah, it's something, it's almost like more like life than life. Because, you know, because it's so spontaneous and it's just, there's so much vitality in it. And if you're not really present, you're kind of not doing it.
It's this total presence. But the scariest thing for me is that sometimes, I mean, you do as much preparation as you can so that when you're actually there, you feel so present. But then sometimes you discover something while you're like literally in the middle of filming a scene that you're like, holy fuck, I've never considered this before. And it's because you're feeling it in real time. And you're like, so that's what acting is. But you're like, oh my God, like, did I forget to do that? Like, I've never considered that. And we did all of these scenes where I wasn't thinking about that. And like, is this going to work? I don't know. But that's like the magic of it, is it's very present and on your toes.
Yeah.
And people, you know, talk about the difference between film versus theater, and that theater is that 100%. But film is almost like that, and every single person's doing it. Like, the cameraman also needs to be 1,000% present. You can't just base it off of like a shot list that you came up with before. Like, the sound guy's going to find something different every take.
Yes,
and it's up to just the directors to like weave that together, which is really scary.
Yeah, tell me about it. And so I've been working on my movie for 10 years. Okay, we won't talk about that. There's so many things though. So, okay, shifting a little bit just to being your generation, having your personal experience, like, of icon, of the industry, of social media, like all these sort of constructs that you've seen change a lot too as you've grown up. I know I certainly have. Like, how do you feel about these sort of now cliche movements like Me Too and sexual identity and just like this kind of reclamation of power that's kind of going on in a way? Like, what is your stance on these things?
I think it's been a really interesting thing to like come of age during, because I remember when I've always been very passionate about like human rights. Like, it's just always been, and I think it's because like I grew up a young woman in an industry sort of controlled by men, but as soon as I stepped into it, that was already starting to change. Like, when I was really young, I always said like, oh, I want to be a director. Like, I want to be the person who's in charge.
Yeah.
And I've been talking to people who are a bit older than me now, and they're like, no, I never even had that thought because I never got to work with any female directors,
Mm.
which is something that I never even, that never even crossed my mind as an issue. And is that because there was more representation, or is that because I was just a dumb kid? I don't know. But I've always been super hyper aware of these things, and I remember at a really young age, someone told me, you can't be an actor and an activist, which I was like, what? This before you have people like Laverne Cox or even like Rose McGowan, or this Me Too movement thing where the two have become so heavily linked.
Mm-hmm.
And it's both really encouraging, but also something I think you have to be really not suspicious of, but you have to check yourself and that conversation constantly. Like, it's really encouraging because I myself feel I was almost never in a situation like a Me Too Harvey Weinstein situation, because that conversation was happening around me as I was growing up. So I knew how to read the signs, and I knew I had the right to, protect myself. But that's also because I was raised by really lovely people, and I was really fortunate that all of the sets I grew up on, for the most part, were like, very protective of me as a young person. But also that conversation, coming about at a time where I was growing up, was hugely protective of me.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also, I'm hyper aware of like people making those movements their personality and utilizing that as a means of gains rather than as a means of actually helping people. Whether it's pop feminism, exploiting movements in that way, or whether it's sort of like there's a big conversation of like queer baiting going around right now.
What's that?
So it's almost like posing as gay or queer in some way, and almost using queer as like a buzzword, and it has nothing to do with what you're actually doing. A lot of people give slack to a lot of straight actors who play queer characters, which I have my own personal thoughts on.
When you want to share that next?
Yeah, sure. Oh, sure. So this is my very personal opinion, and what is frustrating is when you see every queer role taken by a straight actor. That sucks. But I also think sexuality is such a fluid thing, at least it is for me personally, that it ebbs and flows in this way that everyone goes through and everyone experiences at some point on some spectrum, that I think it's a totally valid thing to explore through your performance, especially since I used my performance so often to explore like very personal traumas or things I've gone through mentally or my own past, even though it's like through this character. And when Hollywood is so marketed to like teenagers, like it's also based around this youth, and so when you have really young actors, they might not even know whether or not they're queer at the time that they're taking a role. And I don't think we should limit that to anyone. And I know that's kind of a hot take, and not a lot of people agree with that, and that's totally valid. But I think as long as you're like conscious of the role you're taking on and wanting to do that work and trying to assess the way you fit into it, that's okay. But I know a lot of people don't feel the same way, and I think that's totally fair.
Yeah, I mean, that brings us to this kind of like art life. Is there a line? And isn't art about the creative process, about the journey of breaking boundaries and like you say, this fluidity, I do kind of, it's interesting because I actually agree with you in the sense that I want everyone to have their own perspective on these things. Like I think if someone's passionate about it, they wish it was this way or that way, like they should hold true to that. They should have their voice in that. But as an artist myself, I do feel like it's kind of an open landscape for stepping into different cultures and ethnicities and genders and ages, and that's what art is. Like, you get to do this, you know, and it's like it's exploring a part of the collective psyche. And does it create more division to kind of say, like, you should identify this way in order to be this part? You know, I just wonder.
I think there are certain identities, like sexuality is something that I feel is so fluid with every person,
Mm-hmm.
that exploration in that way is fine. But I think it's really important to, in terms of stories about, I mean, I've played men
Mm-hmm.
and women and I guess people in between.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally identify with all of those parts within myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really special as me that I have been given that opportunity to, but I also identify as queer in that way.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to things like gender or like race, I think it's really exciting to be able to give someone who actually has that background
Mm-hmm.
a voice to explore that, because then that just sort of adds to the whole art tapestry.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's like, especially as a writer or director, if you want to incorporate those stories into your screenplay or into your story, the opportunity to consult with people who
Mm-hmm.
actually are a part of those communities is such a gift.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to further understand the story that you want to tell and the opportunity that can come out of it,
Mm-hmm.
like, I think is really exciting. So I think it's a level of both, of like, sometimes I'm really grateful for the fluidity of like being able to play straight or gay or guy or girl, but then at the same time, like, I don't at this time identify as a trans man,
Mm-hmm.
and I would never do that. Play a trans man, I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And I would much rather learn by working alongside someone who does identify that way and seeing what they can bring to that role.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what's exciting. You know, like, we weren't having conversations like this even 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we were starting to with like Laverne Cox, I guess. But yeah.
It feels really fresh.
It is. It
Yeah.
is. It's something that we're all learning and exploring and reinventing 24/7. And it's like, have you ever read The Dispossessed by Ursula Le Guin?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So I haven't really either. Like, I did for a class, but like it was a class in like college. But that is about this search for a utopia, and it's about this other alien world that exists that is defined as a utopia.
Mm-hmm.
And this physicist from this other world goes there, and this physicist has this theory of the paradox, where it's like, if you throw an apple halfway to a tree, it's only going to get halfway. And you throw it halfway from that point, it's only halfway, and there's this infinite halfway, and you will never actually meet the tree with the apple. And it's this thing of like, you are constantly having to do more work and constantly having to push yourself and your limits, because you're also going to be in a new place and discovering new things each step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
And a utopia can't really exist. The closest we can get to it is like trying to get there,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that's so exciting that we get to see that happening, like, in our industry and shit. And it's a really cool book, so you should read it.
That sounds really cool. I'm actually up for it. I'm up for a good book. I love that. And it is, it's like, it's perception, and it's like the ability to be able to taste something. It's like when you're flying, you know, you can like see the place, but it's like you're not quite there. And even once you get there, it's not going to be like what you imagined it to be. And it's just this kind of ongoing, like you say, tapestry, you know, it's ever evolving. And this to me is like icon. Like, these are all iconic themes and ideas, you know, that I think it's important to recognize that we're all part of this, like, iconic discovery, you know. And I wanted to ask you, so there's a couple of things, because on that same plane, there's like mental health. And I feel like you touched on depression. So, this feels really iconic right now too. The way we're discovering like how to be healthy, how to be balanced, what is like sensationalizing to mental health, what's destigmatizing versus like kind of glamorizing it. So I wonder just like, again, what your take on that is, because I find it really interesting to ask this
That's a
question.
really good question. I did a research paper. This is slightly different, but it's kind of the same thing. I did a research paper at Berkeley. It was like a semester long research paper
Wow.
on depictions of rape in film,
Mm.
and the effect that has on an audience. And in doing that, I watched a bunch of contemporary American films that depicted that, and also spoke to audiences, people I knew who were in the industry, who had nothing to do with the industry, who had been affected by that type of trauma, who hadn't been, just to see, like, is it worth it to even show that
Mm-hmm.
in any degree? And what I sort of realized was, in our representations of these traumas, it's so often sold to us as like one way,
Mm-hmm.
as one thing that we receive almost, the word validation's not right because it can be so invalidating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, in talking to people about these experiences, so many people told me, like, well, it was nothing like that, but I experienced this. And if you want to call it a trauma, like, sure. But it's like, no, that's incredibly valid, what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's something you lived through and are always going to have a part of you. And just because, how they show it on Game of Thrones doesn't match what you experience. And so I think, and there was one big part of the conversation was, do you know the film Elle?
Yeah, I didn't see it.
Okay, I recommend watching it. It's very controversial, but it follows this older woman who is assaulted in that way and has a really specific reaction that is one that people I spoke to had, but I had never seen represented on film before.
Mm.
And it's really just this thing of, like, I think representing these types of traumas or mental illnesses is very valid, but we can't just be telling the same story over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's not just representations of people, it's also like making sure we're covering all the bases, not in one story, but just like in all of our stories, and being aware that there are more than just we're telling. And I think also being aware that there are people out there who are going to receive this, and there's a responsibility that needs to be met there.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to things like mental illness, I think if it's done with the right amount of care and research and thought, and you have the awareness of, like, I'm not trying to be the voice for, like, depression or for all survivors. I'm just trying to tell my one story,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to consult with a lot of other people who have had similar experiences or experiences very different to build the right thing that I'm trying to depict. Like, I think that's all you can do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as far as glamorizing it, I mean, there are plenty of shows that do that and plenty of films that do that. Like, I remember the British teen show Skins.
Oh, yeah.
Growing up, totally glamorized so many types of traumas just by almost making it a personality trait or the full characteristic rather than fully exploring that person and how that was a part of their chemistry rather than the whole thing of it in a way that was very, like, quirky,
Yep.
And I think it's okay to have people exist in your story to talk about certain issues like that, If you want to have a character that suffers with depression, that's totally valid, but they need to be more than just, like, an example of depression that serves the protagonist's viewpoint in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. And because, like, body dysmorphia and, like, body image, that kind of thing is really prevalent still, right? Like,
Totally.
and yeah, it's wild. It's
scary. I mean, it's a huge thing that, like, as I've grown older, have become really aware of, and that's something that I think in a lot of ways the industry hasn't shifted on. Like, I think we've grown a lot when it comes to sexuality and gender. I think we're growing when it comes to racial representations. But as far as different body types, like, because we see a film and we are sold that is what reality looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Because even just the way that films are constructed, like the camera is treated as an eyeball,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a billion things and $1 billion going into this movie to convince you that this is all real.
Mm-hmm.
And then so selling that reality, you're selling like what one type of person looks like, because in so many Hollywood movies, you just get a bunch of hot people. Which is like, I love to look at hot people. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
But people can also be hot and not just like super ripped dudes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's something that we've like pushed far enough, is really showing like different types of bodies and how people live in them. But it's also a hard you feel in it, you know?
Definitely. And to know that the hot bodies aren't necessarily that hot. Hot